You ready?
I was born ready, Phil Valentine.
Well, you must be ready because very recently
Oh
you
no.
had quite the anniversary.
Oh, that's nice of you to think of.
Why? What did you think I was going to
I
think
don't know, but I
of?
thought I was going to be embarrassed.
Well, 31 years of recovery is nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
31.
how'd you do it?
No, nothing past you.
Yeah, how'd you do it?
One day at a time.
Okay, that works.
Yeah. Living with a master recovery coach is helpful
No, you
too
can just call me
sometimes.
author.
Oh, yes.
Author.
Now that you wrote a book.
Author. Author.
I'm pretty
Philip.
impressed that
Philip Valentine.
you held off on sharing that to the second podcast after the book became
Oh, I don't know
published.
why, because you wanted to call me a master.
Oh,
So I don't, I would rather be an author.
okay.
hmm
I wonder if our guest has ever written a book.
Jordan, have you ever written a
I
book?
have not written a book.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I didn't know we started there.
Well, I don't know that we have either, but we're just going to keep going.
My name's Jordan Goldberg. I'm a person in recovery. I don't have 31 years, which is absolutely amazing to hear. I just celebrated 4 years back in July from opioid use disorder, among anything else, but mainly opiates. And now I'm a recovery coach professional and recovery support specialist for community health resources. And I primarily work in our Pathways program, which is an opiate treatment program.
Oh, how
So
cool.
medicated assisted treatment, mainly methadone, but also do Suboxone and just actually work with everyone there. So all kinds of people in their recovery journey, and I'm privileged to do so every day.
Yeah, congratulations. That's such so rewarding to hear.
Yeah, and honestly, 4 years, it's not like 31 is easy, but those first 5 years were really meaningful. I'll just word it that way. So,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yeah.
We are recording an episode of the Recovery Matters podcast. And I want to ask you, what subject matter about recovery would you like to address first and foremost?
Geez. So I think because I have very strong opinions about it, and it's kind of my niche in this is medicated assisted treatment and recovery, and kind of
Well, if you're on medication, you're not really in recovery.
would you rather me take a medication or out on Broad Street trying to get something every day and being a scorn to society and myself and not living?
Doesn't matter to me.
Exactly.
I'm just
You know
fucking
he's
saying.
role playing with
I
you.
know.
He's taken enough training with me to know
We-
when I'm messing around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what you said, you're saying it jokingly, and I
Yeah.
know, we've had this conversation before, not in the podcast briefly. But some people do feel truly the way you just said in
Mhm.
recovery. And I think they forget that their recovery is theirs and someone else's is theirs.
Mhm.
And what I just said about medication I may take or that someone else takes keeps my recovery going, right?
Yeah.
Instead of all the bad things that I was doing previously through my 15, 16 years of opioid use disorder and active addiction. I'm gainfully employed. I'm back in college. I didn't write a book, but I co-wrote
Hmm.
and authored a peer-reviewed empirical journal article about harm reduction in opioid treatment programs, because we are the first that we know of in the country that actually does it inside the program.
Yeah.
So not community-based, not a van. We do it in my office, meal exchange, all that from Connecticut Coalition of Harm Reduction.
Jordan,
So
did you like get a little, detected a little tone when you said not a van and things like that? I'm like, oh my gosh. Jordan.
all those things we do to help people have a healthier, safer life. That's
Mhm.
recovery, right? It's not your definition, my definition.
All right.
It's theirs.
So you got a couple hot topics, right? And um, let's let's talk about the first one, harm reduction. And I'm very curious to hear your definition of harm reduction.
Yeah, I think it's what I think of it as is a safer, healthier life, um, where you still have the opportunity to find sobriety. Right, sobriety is the goal. I wish I could put sobriety on everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but in the meantime, let's keep you safe and alive.
Yeah.
Do most harm reductionists, in your opinion, or in what you've experienced, share that same view as far as the definition goes?
So I think people have different definitions depending on their perspective, right? So doctors tend to have a little different of an opinion based more on like infectious disease and
Oh, yeah.
overdoses, and of course that's something I worry about too. But from my perspective, what I tell everyone I work with in our harm reduction services, my goal is that they never ever have to share equipment or reuse equipment, right? And that's success for me. Because of all the harms that can come from just reusing once, right? And not everyone's in the same place I am or I was. So it is the definition of meeting someone where they're at.
Is it as simple as a process that reduces harm? I mean, is that too
Yeah,
simple?
no, I mean,
And do you like that term?
yeah, I think so. What I've learned over the past couple years, it's used a lot of places in medicine, right? So they use harm reduction when you're talking about diabetes or talking about
Cholesterol medication or
right? All
something.
those things, right? Or you try to educate someone that if they're going to eat fast food to eat the healthier option, right? That's harm reduction. So I'm trying to, everyone that I work with, we're trying to get people to take the safer route, right? If someone, and they're starting conversations. The bigger thing about that meeting someone where they're at, there is no bigger of a definition of that than someone is exchanging needles with me. That is meeting them where they're at, right?
Yeah.
But I am very proud to say that the Narcan I've provided has saved at least 6 lives. Had over a dozen people go to treatment, and we haven't had anyone since we started the program contract hepatitis C or HIV.
That's
So
cool.
that's a win for me.
So,
Huge win.
no, I'm getting to you because you also work in a university setting. How do you define the term harm reduction?
So that's what I wanted to share was I actually buy in completely to TJ Akins, who's a CCAR staff member, to his quote that he shared about harm reduction, and that's you can't get into recovery if you don't have a heartbeat. And so, not in the most extreme end, there are folks who approach from a moderation perspective or one set of substances and not another. But I think that for me, making really big decisions, especially for the young people that I work with, making lifelong decisions of abstinence, it's really hard to make a big decision like that. So how can we get you to a place of getting more clear-headed so that you're making choices for your life and that the substance isn't making the choices for you?
I had heard that definition of TJ. So I like that a lot, right? And I'm going to steal that from him. So sorry, TJ. But
Oh, he'd be honored.
I think too, like you said, there are different ends of the spectrum completely, right? So Canada has a very radical approach to harm reduction, right? In certain places.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so in Canada, in British Columbia, there's a place called On-Site and Insight, right? So it's a safe injection site, right? It's not safer, it's safe. They have had over 5 million injections and no one has passed away. Upstairs, they have detox and they will link you to inpatient treatment if needed, right? They are looking at having
So,
safe supply, which
If
is
somebody hasn't heard of a safe injection site, just describe that briefly.
So you would go in there and you would buy wherever you're going to buy from, whoever you get from. It's kind of set up More or less, if you would think about like a tanning salon, right? You have your own little private area with a mirror and there's lots of camera. And there are nurses and trained professionals there that have Narcan and safe supplies, and they monitor you. They leave you alone, like they leave you to your privacy, but they'll check on you every few minutes. And if required, they'll administer Narcan. The really cool thing that gets lost in all that is the part that they have people in recovery working there that have had some sobriety, and they will link them to either an inpatient or they have a detox program upstairs with medical staff, right? So I think that part gets lost in the headlines, right? That it's there are other services, right? And they're now looking at even a safe supply with the fentanyl overdoses we're having. People don't know what they're getting, right? It's Russian roulette every time, right? I think I sound like the old man on the porch. I always tell everyone this, that in my day, tolerance had a lot to do with overdoses, right? People had one, myself included, because you were like, oh, I could do one more of something today than yesterday, and it doesn't work out well. Now you have no idea what you're buying, right? So the idea of giving things that are medical grade and you know exactly what it is to people that are choosing to still use is the next evolution. I actually just went to a little training on what they're doing in Canada virtually, and it is radical, right? It is the other end of the pendulum that it's swinging to. People are going to do what they're going to do anyway, so let's keep them safe, keep them alive, so they can have that choice.
Would you like to see that in Connecticut? Safe injection sites?
Safe injection, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's happening anyway.
Okay.
The safe supply, I learned about it about a month ago, and I've wrestled with it ever since in my mind.
Okay.
Because
Fair enough.
I think I'd be wrestling for a while.
I used to, when I was in active addiction, I would think all the time, I wish I could just drive to CVS and get something. And for that to actually become a reality, I don't know if it's a step too far where we're almost at enabling. Almost.
What do you feel about marijuana?
Smoke all you want.
And
It's your recovery.
But it's also a safe supply, though, now, too, right?
Right. Yes, there is. Right. Because we had
safe supply of alcohol.
Right. So we had gotten a bulletin at work in January, I believe, from the coroner's office saying that the marijuana supply had been contaminated from fentanyl. It turned out not to be true. There were other circumstances with it, but it could happen, right?
Sure.
Illicit dealers are not the cleanliest people. You're not going to clean your scale off in between things, right? Like, it can happen if someone doesn't have an opiate tolerance. It could be fatal. So the idea that it's coming from a safe place, people are going to do what they're going to do anyway. And I think the biggest point of all this and is it's your life, it's your recovery. It's not mine, right?
Yeah.
So if it works for you, if it helps you, if your life is manageable, if it's better than it was yesterday, smoke a joint. Doesn't bother me.
Did you always feel this way, or did working in the field? So how did you feel prior?
Yeah. So geez. When I first found my recovery, I've come to realize it was jealousy of not being able to use, right?
Envy almost, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I knew
I want to do that.
right. I knew I couldn't manage a job any longer. I couldn't manage my finances. I was almost 32 years old, living in my parents' basement again. Like, things were going south. And then I would see people that could drink. They could use coke recreationally. They could use pills recreationally. Right? I don't know how.
I don't know how either.
I've learned, and I've learned how. Right? Is absolutely a disease that we in recovery were inflicted with. Right? So anyway, 2 years of that in my recovery, and then through working in the field, through my education, through all my trainings, through my just meeting now thousands of people, it's totally changed into people are going to make the choices they're going to make for their lives. And it's okay. It's not my pathway isn't the only one, right? That's the biggest thing I've taken away from everything the past 2+ years, right?
And the next piece to that, which we teach in the Recovery Coach Academy, And it is just because somebody chooses a pathway different than mine, that's not a threat to my recovery. And you wrestled with that because you're almost perceiving, A, I'm envious, and so B, maybe that makes it a threat to my recovery because I might want to go try what that person's doing. But as you get more solid in your recovery, I think the threat goes away too.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I helped a couple get to inpatient, both of them. Two people that utilized the harm reduction. Every time they saw me, planted the seed, watered it a couple times a week, all that. They finally, okay, we'll go. Unbeknownst to me, he had used the restroom before I drove him to the inpatient facility, right? So he was a little intoxicated in my car. I just checked on him, right? Like, and so I come back. He was okay. He got where he was. He's safe. I've heard, like, he's totally fine. He's inpatient, right? So I get back, and my boss asked me, "Does that bother you?" And I had to think. I said, "No, not anymore." So it would have, but as I've gotten more solid in my recovery, it doesn't even appeal to me anymore.
What a great boss to ask you that question.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky where I work. Right, like, a lot of people are super supportive of recovery, and like, yeah, there could be pitfalls, all that, whatever. But yeah, very, very caring how I feel about things, but also, the rest of my coworkers. Right, there's things that could be triggering for everyone just because you're not using drugs. Right, this is a tough job, vicarious trauma, and
but
that's tough.
Wow, so
sometimes.
you're hitting on all the points. Triggers. You used the word. How concerned are
Vicarious trigger.
Yeah, well, how concerned are you about triggers now in your recovery?
Yeah, not really so much. I'm
Can
still
you avoid them?
no. And here's my
Oh,
analogy,
right.
right? So if I walk on ice skating rink, so I don't like the term slip. I don't like it. It's a choice, right? So if I walk on an ice skating rink every day in my Jordans,
Something's going to happen.
right, and
Yeah.
if I have all the supports, if I have the people I can call, if I have all the stuff I'm doing for my recovery, I can get through it, right? So, gonna get real personal, but whatever. My dad passed away last summer. The thing I feared the most happened, and I got through it without relapsing.
How about that? Congratulations.
Thank you. Like, almost saying to life, like, bring it on. Like, you know what I mean? If I got through that, the thing I feared the most for my recovery, but it also gives me the perspective of you can get through these things. It's not, I don't even truly like the word trigger, right? Because trigger is a gun. You pull a trigger, something happens.
Right, neither do I. That's why I think so many people are afraid. People in recovery are so fragile.
Oh my God, don't get me started.
We don't want to trigger them because they're going to relapse because I said the wrong thing and I triggered them. I say, what a crock of crap that is.
Can we swear on this?
Yeah, you can do whatever you like. Is it? Can we, Melvin?
Okay,
Give
good.
a thumbs up.
I agree with you 100%, right? I'm not effing broken,
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a child. So we learn in the Recovery Coach Academy, right, to kind of come full circle, empathy and compassion,
Yeah.
not sympathy.
Right.
Don't feel bad for me. Don't
Right.
feel bad for what I went through. Don't feel bad if I relapse because you know what? It's a choice. Everything I do is a choice. If I don't, so working where I work at the opioid treatment program, people have to come in daily for the most part at first.
Sure.
You choose not to come in. You're making a choice that there's going to be consequences to your medication. There's going to be consequences to your recovery. There's going to be, life has consequences.
Your life.
Right. Don't put me in bubble wrap. Don't protect me. Right. And I work with clinicians and therapists. Right. And so a lot of the time I have the harshest perspective, which is like, don't baby me, don't sympathize, right? Like, have compassion and empathy, and that fine line of don't think I'm broken. Talk to me like I'm a person. Don't be afraid you're going to say the wrong thing, because you know what? If I go relapse, I had thought about it 6 weeks ago, and I'm just waiting for you to say something so I can go do it. That's like, and so I'm glad I'm not the only one that feels that way. I think there's a lot of us, because that whole trigger thing, right? You pull a trigger, something happens.
Right.
It's consequences to actions. It's a different and choices.
I did have somebody lambaste me for allowing harm reduction in our collegiate recovery community. Really thought that I was being completely irresponsible, endorsing anything except complete abstinence and honestly 12-step. Like there was no other way. But I often feel for students, and I always use the phrase return to use rather than relapse, because each time you're not going back to ground zero. Each time you are learning, right? You're taking the power, you're making the choice to return to use, but you are learning. And I've often used Phil's story of surviving cancer, that, they started off with a certain kind of chemo inpatient, and they moved to weekly chemo and radiation, and how many, like every time the cancer reoccurs or is resisting the disease, you adjust the treatment plan. And so for me, it's return to use. You're not relapsing, because if you take that moment and learn from it and adjust your treatment plan, adjust what wasn't working to treat your disease, and it's going to take as many modifications as it takes, right? But I do believe, and I do believe that there's a few of the folks in my community that wouldn't be alive without that ability to come back in the door without shame when they return to use.
Yeah. And I think that's built over time and trust and the harm reduction model, right? That we're not preaching to people. We're not telling them what they have to do. We're giving them options. And then, you know what I found, at least, so I do these needle exchanges, I do all that with people that are, in pre-contemplation, right? Or they've gone back to pre-contemplation, right? And they'll come in my office, and because that trust was built over that 6 weeks, 8 weeks of doing that, they'll go, I'm ready to go. Like, call access line, do whatever you have to do. I'm ready to go right now. And I've asked people afterwards, like, no, I've been seeing the therapist for a year. I've been doing that, but I just didn't feel comfortable, right? And so there's that comfortability, and I often equate addiction and recovery to cancer, right? Myself with folks and with families. It helps to, for the imagery of it. And I'm never going to be active addiction free, right? So I always have to be cognizant. I always have to do checkups. I always have to readjust that treatment plan, whatever. And going back to that part, right? Our addiction's a book. My addiction's my book. So if I go back to use, I'm not starting on page 0. I'm starting on page 19 instead of I ended on 20.
Right.
So all those lessons are still there.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part is it jumps past page 20 really quickly. And the return to uses, which I like that term, is always going to be worse than the original, right?
Well, I want to also go back a little bit to this idea of, you said that it's up to you to manage triggers in your life, right? It's up to me to understand what the triggers are, what they do to me emotionally, and then I have a choice whether to respond to the fact if I use over it or not, right? And over 34 years, I've chosen not to use over all those triggers that have come my way. What's arrogant about that is that a person thinks that if I say something to you that's so triggering, whether accidentally or on purpose, that I have the power to make you go out and use. If that was true, in the throes of your addiction, I would have the power to say the thing to get you to stop. So why are we so damn concerned about triggering people? Just say tell your truth without blame or judgment.
Right.
Just tell people what you feel.
I think the big one is what you said, that judgment piece, right? And people don't even realize that they have their judgment.
Just
right?
by tiptoeing around us,
right?
That they're judging us, that we're fragile.
We all have that implicit bias within us, and we don't even realize it's there, right? But we, as people in recovery, realize like, how am I going to ever judge anyone, right? We could sit here for 24 hours. I tell you all the things that I'm embarrassed about that I did in my active addiction, right? I can't judge anyone for what they're doing, but that's just innate, right? I could say the exact same thing as someone else, but it's going to come off non-judgmental because I'm not afraid I'm going to hurt your feelings. And you know what? If we disconnect because I say something that did upset you, I think it's important for anyone to just go, hey, I'm sorry. Like, or what did I do, or ask, right? So But like you said, say what you mean what you say, and you can't control how someone else is going to feel,
Right.
right? And you can manage it afterwards for sure, or you can reconnect and all that.
We can
But
only be sure of our intentions in
right,
any given situation. And as long as my intention is to do no harm, that I'm trying to come out of a place of care, love, and understanding, I might be firm with you because that's my art of recovery coaching that's saying, all right, I gotta turn the heat up
right,
on you a little bit because you're not the cool, calm approach. Let's try a little heat and see how you respond to that because that's just my art. And I might not frame it in my head that way, but I might say something that's a little more aggressive and stirring your pot than at other times.
yeah. I mean, there's certain people through the past couple of years doing this that need the therapeutic voice and the encouragement and the calm all the time.
Encouraging,
And then
supportive.
there's the people that you need to be completely honest with, say what you need to say, and sometimes they need a little kick in the butt, right? And
Yeah,
it's worked. And so knowing at first I was afraid to do that when I first started
right.
doing recovery coaching, right? Or
But
recovery
you've been
support.
practicing that now.
Right. And
Yeah.
I have figured out my art, right?
Yeah.
And I often am asked, I mean, by the very high ups in the organization I work for, like, how did you do X, Y, and Z? We've been working with this guy for 10 years and no one ever got him past contemplative. How
Right.
did you get him to actually, I, I can't really explain it or teach it, but the practice
Exactly.
over time and coming from the place I'm coming from, which is non-judgmental and caring and all that, things tend to stick. But I also know, or I'm learning to know, when it's time to do that. 'Cause it's like almost the last tool in my toolbox, right?
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
sometimes it has to happen.
Right.
Um,
You're not going to hit,
And
hit everything with a hammer all of
right,
its
right, exactly, yeah.
yeah, I mean, for me, I, I went through a little bit of a season looking for a therapist. I do not want someone to comfort me and agree with me. And I always used to say when we were going to church regularly, like I like a sermon that slaps me upside the head. So I want that heat, even though I might be bawling in front of you.
Right.
Like I want that.
And I always say where I work at least. So again, working with a bunch of therapists and clinicians and my way is very different. I don't have they always tell me it's their therapeutic voice, and it's the same with everyone, right? Not everyone's the same, so how you use the same approach,
Right.
but they tend to because that's how they're trained and they're taught, and without that life experience
to treat
piece,
everybody the same.
right?
That's the way of not showing bias or
Right,
something.
and
Oh
showing
gosh. No.
making it a safe environment to process your okay, but you know what? If someone's sticking a rig in their arm 10 times a day, you need to take a different approach because and if you've tried that and it's not working, it's time to have the conversation about consequences, reality, and maybe that will do it. Because I need to go to bed at night knowing I've tried everything with someone, right? Like, we can't get attached to the outcomes. We don't know what's going to happen. But I can promise myself I've done everything I can, right? And so treating everyone the same, that's not doing everything I can.
No.
And it just sometimes, like you said, the therapy, I'll be honest, I still see a therapist now. I searched around for a little while and I found someone that is very direct and helps me work through things. But at times he's like, Jordan, you're thinking like, about like whatever he has to say, but it's never, oh, that's okay. If everything was okay out in the real world for me, I wouldn't
be here.
I
as a
wouldn't be here. Right?
therapist.
And that's why I've always said, right? Or so when people come into the OTP,
Yeah.
if everything was fine outside, they wouldn't need us.
Right.
So it's our job, if you want to call it, right, to help motivate, to help encourage, to help support them through the stages of change, right? And sometimes that gets lost, and you can always find research that proves your point, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what people tend to fall on sometimes, right? You could read something, I could read something, and Phil could read something, and it's going to be different to all of us. But if it's going to back up my argument, I'm going to use it, right?
I'm kind of so working in a higher education setting, I'm a little relentless when I get the research. How many people responded? And so often they're basing something on 150 people. 150 people, not like 150 people in our setting, but 150 people across the United States or across the world. 150 people. Okay, that is not
It's
fact.
right, right. And and Bill, maybe correct my numbers if I'm wrong. It's about 20 million people between active addiction and recovery in this country.
23.5
20, okay.
are
Yeah,
in recovery.
yeah,
But somewhere in there,
yeah.
right? So that's, and we're all different. We all have different experience, and we all.
Different
Bill and I are
Different
different, as
pathways.
most people will tell you, right, Melvin? Yes.
But it's just those. I think the biggest thing is something I believe you have in all the centers. How can I help support your recovery today? Because I think the key term is that today at the end, because
Yeah.
yesterday it was different, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's support. I don't sit there and tell anyone what to do, and even if it's sometimes you hear the worst ideas, and this person is going to make a mistake they're going to regret, and hopefully live to regret, right? But all I can do is give you the information, right?
Right.
And then
Ask questions
Right.
about it. I think
Exactly.
more the coaching field, the recovery coaching field, is really the quest for the question. What's the right question in this moment? And to get people to start thinking about letting them dive inside and find the answers for themselves.
and,
Because that's what I appreciate the most is people who ask me really tough questions. And I also believe the number one compliment a coach can receive is, wow, that's a good question.
I agree with you. And so, again, back to my work, right? Therapists and clinicians, I tend to find out more accurate information, right? And sometimes information that wasn't known by anyone else about someone. And that is important to share with the team because it's a clinical, it might fit something else, right? And I've said before, it's like, how did you find, I just asked the right question.
I just
Where you asked a
I
question.
asked, but I'm not in this box, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm almost done with my bachelor's. I'm all like in psychology and addiction counseling. So like there is direction to them from the recovery coach. It's this mix that makes my art of it. But more than anything, and you taught me this very early in the RCA, I'm curious.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of my questions are, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
And people are very interested to talk about themselves. I mean, heck, that's why I'm here. I get to talk about myself, right? It's great. And so when you start diving into it, like you said, our thoughts are very superficial, right? I'm only going to think to question one, what's going on. But if you're asking me 10 questions, I have to go 10 questions deeper. And so hopefully I can get someone, or we all can get someone to move just a little closer to the life they want, right? And that they deserve.
We're going to fight over us. So one of the things that I think about a lot as my role as a recovery coach compared to a clinician is I have the luxury of creating a relationship with the person I'm talking to. And I think
Without the really thick clinical boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a difference. I absolutely believe in clinical care. It got me through a really difficult time more than once in my life. But I think that is what the difference is, and why a lot of times recoveries are more connected with their recovery coaches, because we're forming, doesn't have to be a personal friendship, but we're forming a relationship where clinicians are discouraged to do.
Right. And we have more, the clinical piece, right? The insurance, you have to see X amount of people in a day. I don't, at least at my work, I could spend 4 hours with someone if I want to that day because they need it. And I'm not saying that therapists won't do that, but they're more hesitant to do that, right? Where I've done it, I've spent 4 or 5 hours with one person doing whatever they need to do that day or talk about whatever, or because that's what they needed that day. And so you build these meaningful relationships where then I can ask difficult questions, right? And live in that world a little bit easier. But the therapeutic piece is very important at times, right? I will always, I don't know how you guys feel, when we go into that world, you start talking about like coping skills, right? Someone in early recovery, there is no coping skill for opiate withdrawal. There is no coping skill for the depression I feel coming off of cocaine and alcohol, right? Like connection, support, and relationships are going to get you through the first 2 years. Then you can start working on that stuff. So when you have a death in the family, you can lean on that piece. But I don't need that intense therapy all the time at parts in my life, right? So one of the things, at least I find discouraging, is everyone at ROTP, and I believe it's nationwide, has to see a master's level therapist for their treatment plan, to get their medication, to use a recovery coach, to utilize all the other resources. Not everyone needs therapy once a month,
Gatekeeper.
right?
One size fits all.
Right, exactly. And it's been an intense struggle to try to get that
Yeah.
to change. I don't know. That is one piece that they're telling people there's multiple pathways, you have to do this, and then the other hand, you gotta meet with your therapist once a month for 20 minutes or we can't give you your medication. But you have all these other things. But if you don't do this one thing, can't utilize any of them, right? And
It's illogical.
right. And it makes me want to pull my hair out a lot of days.
Well, it's the payers that are driving the system. So let's wrap up our conversation. This might take a little while because it's what you started with, medication assisted recovery, MAR, and there's medication assisted treatment. What have you found is public perception overall about medication assisted recovery?
I think it's changing, right? But the perception from a lot of families, people in recovery, Phil, don't yell at me, the old timers, right? I'm taking a medication. I am not in recovery because I am not sober because I'm still getting high. Nope, wrong. Like it's the only. I know in my soul I would have never found any length of sobriety from opiates without the help of medication.
So
right?
Can I ask you what medication?
Yeah, so I take Suboxone, right?
Yeah.
It has helped me tremendously.
So
right?
what does Suboxone do?
I can function and feel normal.
I know, but do you know the biological
Oh
piece
yeah,
to it?
mine's. Oh, you want the whole thing?
Well, yeah, just
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll back up. So opiates, fentanyl, heroin, whatever, is an opiate agonist, right? So
Yeah.
it binds to the opiate receptors, then sends signals to your brain to release this
I feel wonderful.
Right. Serotonin, dopamine,
Yeah.
flows down, all
Euphoria.
that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
When you stop taking an opiate agonist, go into withdrawal because your body basically thinks it's dying because the brakes are on all that stuff. So it's not like we're getting little, we're getting no perceived dopamine or serotonin. So our bodies need dopamine to function, to move, to have motivation, to not be depressed, to do any human function requires dopamine. Take that away, your body goes through withdrawal, which if anyone tells me it's like the flu, we might fight. Like is, you know what I mean? Like it's so beyond that, but you can't, I've been one way or another doing this for 20 years.
Right.
I can't articulate what it's like. Right. Anyway, so now buprenorphine, which is the active ingredient in Suboxone, binds to the opiate receptors stronger than an agonist. Right. So you think about like a lock and a key. It goes in the lock. It turns the key a little bit so my body doesn't realize anything is going on, and I'm able to feel and function normally. Right. That's what, the most layman terms, that is what it does. It lets my body recognize something's there. So I don't go into withdrawal, and I'm able to function normally without euphoria, without high, without sedation, without any of those feelings. My normal day to day can occur. Right. It has allowed me to then, at once I stopped, shaking after about 6 months because there still is some discomfort. Anyone that tells you it's seamless and you never feel anything, I think is glamorizing it, right? You still feel some discomfort. So it allowed me to find the support, the connection, the relationships, do the therapy I needed to figure out what piece of my life was missing that drugs filled, right? We're all puzzles, and drugs are the last piece that some people need to feel whole, and I was one of them, I believe. And so I've been able to do all those things, right? If I choose to ever come off of it, or if I don't, right, I don't know. But for now, I'm kind of at if it's not broken, don't if it's not broke, don't try to fix it.
So how long have you been on it now?
Yeah, since day one. So we're talking 4 years and 2 months.
So a lot of people, for me, the misconception is that if you're on like a Suboxone or medication assisted recovery, you'd be kind of like low energy, nodding off, you're still high. You seem anything but that.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anybody would have known. I certainly would have known. I've been in this field for a long time, only because you told me.
Yeah.
And also because it's not really what medicine you're on is
Right.
really all
I
that
mean,
relevant, right?
certainly there's
Unless you want to talk about it.
certainly there's people that are in a place that they abuse their medications, right? And so I think
Well,
that's
you don't have to be in recovery to do
right,
that. Or not
exactly,
in
right.
recovery.
So I
People
think
do that
that's
all
where
the
some
time.
of the preconceived notions about it are. I mean, to your point, I consistently 6 days a week do an 18 to 19 hour day, right? Like
Well,
I
we
get up
could
at
talk about that on another
you know what I mean?
time.
I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and I have energy throughout the day. And I will tell you, in those 4 years and 2 months, I have not committed a crime. I have not stolen. I have not bought illegal drugs. I have relationships with my family again. I have a great job that has a future in it. Like
Yeah.
that was not happening when I was abusing prescription and illicit opiates,
Right.
right? So it's not for everyone either, right? And that's the point. Just like anything else, there's pathways to it, and it works for me, right? And one of the great questions one of your other recovery coaches taught me was ask someone how it's working for them.
Yeah.
Without judgment, without anything, just ask them.
Yeah.
This works for me. It works for a lot of people, right? And I think that's the most important part of it, right? I still do other things for my recovery.
Well, so we're on the same page. That was going to be the next piece. It's not the medication is just a tool. It's one piece. It's one thread of your tapestry. What else is in your tapestry of recovery?
Yeah. So I'll go to meetings when I need to. And by need to, I mean with something, if I feel like I don't have connection for that day or that week, right? My biggest thing that's for my recovery is actually doing the recovery coaching, right? And it's just that part of giving back. So volunteering on top of it with other organizations, whether it be soup kitchens, right? I was a chef for a long time, so I'll cook for whatever. I do therapy. All the different things I do. My dog, all the little coping skill stuff right now, because I'm 4 years in, that I found that helps me work through it. But at the beginning, it was getting stabilized, really intense therapy because I had been through, some stuff that I'd never dealt with. I'm able to think about now and not think about using, where back then I thought about it, I instantly went and used, right? So I've put the work in with the help of the tool, because the medication, especially with opiates or alcohol, right? Anything, it gave me a choice. That's all it does, right? Where that withdrawal piece took the choice away from me. Besides, I wanted to be high, don't get me wrong, but took that piece away from me for so long. I wasn't ever able to choose to not be. Now I'm able to choose what I want my life to look like.
Jordan, I feel like you just gave the best bring it to life for me explanation of all of that I've ever heard. So thank you for that. And I could really
Which piece, the part about helps provide a choice?
all the way from the opioid receptors and how you
yeah.
described it. And, I can correlate that a little bit that, I always had anxiety, but I was very high functioning in recovery. And it wasn't until 4 years ago that anxiety tipped over and I could not keep from crying every single day for hours on end. And I waited over a year before deciding, because of all the messages about, if I go on medication, I'm not sober anymore and all that stuff. And I went on a antidepressant that I've been on now for 4 years or 3 years for anxiety. So it actually helps. But I always referred to it as like being an egg, and all those tears and emotions, anxiety were inside the raw egg, and I'm cracked. And so all I feel like the medication does is keep a a nice layer from allowing that to pop out. And I still cry. I cried in the last podcast. So, like,
Right. I think
it's not that I remove my emotions, but it allows me to manage them.
I think we have in society at least two distinctly different conceptions of MAT or MAR. And one is either you're just on a drug and you're still on something, you're still getting high, or the other one is it's going to fix everything. I've had too many families come into me and we talk about their son or daughter started MAT. They've been on the medication 3 days, 4 days. Why are they still using? Why are they still swaying? Why are they still having these thoughts? And you have to have those conversations, right? And manage the expectations just like anything else, right? If someone's on diabetes medicine and they still are eating 4 Big Macs a day, guess what? You're still going to have the issues. You have to still put in the work. And I don't want that to get lost with the recovery community, right? There's still work we put in. And it doesn't change anything because I'm a way better person, way better than I ever was when I was using. Right?
So, my last another kind of interesting question, tough question that I've asked and heard people talk about is when they're on medication. Do you ever feel that, I mean, your life is really good now, right?
Yeah.
And compared to where it was, it's incredible. Do you think your life would be even better if you were off the medication? And because sometimes people think the medication gets, it kind of gives you a glass ceiling. Because if you're on that medication, you're never going to get to like a stage 3 or 4 or 5 of recovery that we might talk about in the Recovery Coach Academy. What are your thoughts on that?
No, why? Right? I'm not
like,
I mean, like that
question.
Like that, I appreciate that, but that question doesn't even make sense to me, right?
Great.
It doesn't. I put it this way: I spent every waking and sleeping moment thinking about using for 16 years.
Yeah.
I spend 15 minutes a month at my doctor's and 30 seconds a day taking the medicine. It does not affect my life in any way, right? It doesn't.
Well, it's cloaking your brain so you can't let the spiritual presence or power of God to get in. Oh, I've heard all kinds of things in my ears.
If I could imagine my life better, I would, but I can't.
Oh, good.
Right? I'm as happy as I've ever been. I mean, I started using when I was 15, 16 years old, and then really heavy from 17 to 32, right? So I clearly was not a happy child, right? I had a great childhood. My parents were great. Like, it had nothing to do with them, but there was something, right? I can't answer. I can't see anything better, right? Can I have more money? Sure. Can I do all that stuff? But that's not going to change if I come off the medicine. I'm not going to get a raise at work. My dog's not going to live longer. I'm not going to meet the woman of my dreams tomorrow because I come off my Suboxone, right? Maybe, right? I won't be at the doctor's for 15 minutes this month, right?
Like a coincidence, right?
And so it has nothing to do with the medicine. It's everything to do with the person.
Right.
Right. I work as hard on my recovery as I did on my active addiction.
How many people feel this way?
Which part?
About the part about you're such a, like, it seems to me, very practical, realistic view of the medication you're on.
Yeah.
How many people feel like really see the benefit and the power and what it can do, and if taken correctly and do all that?
My experience.
I also say that even though we've been talking about this for 20 plus years, that the majority of people still think that being on medication is, for lack of a better word, wrong. Is that what you still think so? Or is it shifting? Is it changing?
No, it depends, right? In my experience, it's like 50-50. I have a 50-50 shot when I talk to someone about it, right?
Either they do or they don't.
Right, and it's
so does it always land like 50-50
yeah, I mean, there's no. I always talk about it. I'm saying, like, there's clients that dislike they're on medication. There are
Yeah.
clients that call it liquid handcuffs with the methadone. There are clients that,
Hmm.
when they show up for their Suboxone appointment, make some comment, right? Um, in a way, I chose for 16 years. It's not the doctor's fault. It's that I have to do that. I'm choosing to do this now, right?
Hmm.
I think part of it is taking responsibility for my recovery, right? And so it's there's some clients that praise the medications like I do that, and families. Oh my God,
Yeah.
this has changed everything for me because I get to make going back to that choice, right?
Hmm.
Some people, their families will come in and they're against it, right? They'll come in week 1 and they'll be totally against their family member being on an MAR. When their family member moves into action or maintenance, they are the first people that call me and thank me.
Yeah.
They are the first people that send us flowers and cards and whatever. And oh my God, I don't know where. So the power of it, just like the power of recovery, is all in the individual, but we all have the potential, right? And so that the medication just helps us. Again, it's all about choice.
Yeah.
I want choice in my life, and it does that for me, right? And anyone that would, at least to me, say, "Oh, you have to come off it. Like you have to. You're not in recovery." And I actually listen to them. There's something wrong with me. A, but B, you want me back doing what I was doing because I didn't have a lot. I didn't have a lot longer. I was going to live that way, and I was hurting other people and all those bad things. But even with,
Okay.
you know, the some of the potential or the problem, the can be within the medical community, within the recovery community, right? So I had an injury last year, went to the doctor, my dog bit me, right? Go to the doctor, walk in, and medication list, right? And I don't care, as you see, I'll talk to whoever about this, right?
Mhm.
So put down. Doctor walks in, first words out of her mouth, "I'm not giving you pain meds." Thanks, I didn't ask for any.
Wow.
So there's that part I understand. People are weary of
Did you
telling
say that?
people. Oh, it was that and a little more.
Good for you.
It's
That's being an advocate.
Yeah,
It's
it
one of
was
the roles, even if you're a little angry, a little heated.
right. Yeah, I can bring myself back a little bit, but yeah, I was heated, right? Like wasn't there for that,
Right.
and wouldn't have like even take him if you want, right? But like it was just so. But then I went to the actual hand surgeon. He sees it on the medication list, shakes my hand, gives me a hug, says, "I'm proud of you. My wife's in recovery X number of years." So that's what I mean. It's you don't know, but I have chosen to advocate for it, right?
Right.
Not everyone wants to or has to or whatever, but I've chosen to stand on a soapbox and take the arrows from the people that want to throw them and
Hmm.
try to have a conversation. Also realizing I can't change your mind. That is irrational. But I can give you information that can maybe get you to see it a different way, right?
Move you a click one way or
Yeah,
another.
that's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Ultimately, what someone thinks doesn't affect me. Life's good.
Did we, is there anything we didn't cover you'd like to add?
No, we just talked about a lot of things. This
We
was
did.
fun.
Yeah. Stuff that you're really passionate about. I love to see that.
Yeah, this is
And see, Jordan knows me well enough that I'm just not necessarily believing. I'm just
You
asking
were
him
the
a
only
question.
one that was mm-mm.
Well, that's okay.
this is like I'm happier now than I've ever been, but I've chosen to talk about this. Right, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I always thought it was something else, but um, the power of recovery and the potential that everyone has. Right, the one thing I do want to say is I'm not special. Right, my mom might say I am. Right, but
I hope so.
I mean, like, but anyone has the potential to do this, to be happy, to get the life they want, to not be held hostage by a drug or alcohol, right? And if they're not ready for that, that's safer, healthier life. So hopefully one day they can make that decision, do make that decision. But I have seen things that during my active addiction phase before I was kind of enlightened into it, I would go, God, that person's got it's so bad, right? They've hit rock bottom, which I hate that term. And seeing people in their recovery, like they found their recovery, which maybe for them meant sobriety. They got a job, they got a house, they got married, they got all these things, right? And honestly, and this isn't just because you're saying here, the best decision I've made in a really long time was taking the RCA because it kicked off everything, right? It was a foot in the door into the field I want to be in because it needs to change, and I want to be part of that, right? I think we need more people in recovery working in the field that will talk about it, right? Where I am, I'm up to, finishing my degree and then this, and I have a job, and the RCP and the RSS will never come off my letterhead no matter what other letters are there, right? I don't care. Like, tell you not to disclose, I'll go work somewhere else, because I think that there's a difference between knowing and understanding, and people in recovery, we understand it. Not just reading out of a book, right?
So Jordan, I think the best way to sum up our conversation is what you just said a minute ago, is that harm reduction really gives you the chance to someday make that choice for a happier, more beautiful life. So thank you for putting your face on recovery in that.
Thank you for
message.
the opportunity.